Welcome to today's episode of the 12 Days of Celtic Mythology. This is day 4. No. Every day this happens. Welcome to today's episode of the 12 Days of Celtic Mythology. Oh God. Welcome. Help! I've got to stop smiling so much and then it'll be okay. Put my glum face on. Welcome to today's episode of the 12 Days of Celtic Mythology. This is season 4, day 7. This will be a slightly more light-hearted episode. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm quite fond of all sorts of livestock, cattle, horses, sheep. You might be wondering where the pigs are. I'll admit that in real life they're not my favorite animal, but they're super important in Celtic mythology, so much so that I was honestly afraid that they would take over the whole 12 days. And since there were quite a lot of swine in season 3, I've banished them to a separate series that I'm planning for later this winter. I'll be doing a series of talks for my Patreon patrons in the coming months, where we'll take a deep dive into swine in Celtic mythology. So if you join my Patreon at the $7 level or above, you get to come to those talks. But enough blatant advertising, let's have a story. In the early 7th century, there was a king's son in Ulster called Fiachna Finn, and he went on a visit to Lochlin. No one quite knows where Lochlin is. It's probably Scandinavia-ish, but not necessarily always. Lochlin at that time was ruled by a king called Iorgr Mór, and Iorgr and Fiachna became friends, but during the visit, a disease seized the king of Lochlin, and none of his physicians could cure him. They told him there was no hope unless a shining white cow with red ears could be found and boiled for him to eat. The whole country was searched, and finally a single cow of that type was found, and the cow belonged to an old woman they called the Cailleach Dubh, or the Black Hag. They offered her a different cow in trade. Very nice cow. No, I'm not interested, she said. I like my own cow. 4 cows were offered. She considered it, and finally she said, I'll only make the trade on condition that Fiachna guarantees it. This was agreed, but after that, Fiachna was called away to take up the throne of Ulster, his father having died. About a year later, Fiachna, now king of Ulster, heard cries of distress coming from outside his royal fortress. He bade his men to let the supplicant in. It was the hag from Lochlin. Fiachna welcomed her and asked after her. Evil tidings I have, said the hag. The king of Lochlin has deceived me in the matter of the 4 cows, which were to be paid to me for my own cow. I never received a single one of them. I myself will gladly give you 4 cows on his behalf, said Fiachna, for you are certainly owed them. And the hag said, I will not take them now, the 4 cows you are offering me. It's true that you've been wronged, said Fiachna patiently. I will give you 20 cows then. I shall not take them, came the reply. Well, said Fiachna, I will give you 4 times 20 cows, 20 for each cow that you lost. Will that do? By my word, said the hag, if you offered me all the cattle in Ulster, I would not take them. I demand that you make war on the king of Lochlin and set out at once. So Fiachna mustered his men and notified the king of Lochlin of his intention to do battle. With 10 battalions he marched on Lochlin, where Iorgr had raised an army of equal size. Well, they fell to fighting, and Fiachna's forces were slaughtering the Lochlin men in great numbers. But then the king of Lochlin loosed venomous sheep, which had been hidden in his tent, onto the battlefield, and 300 of Fiachna's men were killed by the sheep that day, and 300 on the following day, and another 300 fell on the third day. And this was grievous to Fiachna, who said, "Sad is the journey that brought us to Lochlin, only to see our men killed by sheep. How can we avenge this, and how can we bear the shame? To be killed by sheep is hardly a fitting death." "Give me my arms," said Fiachna. "No more of the men of Ireland shall fall by these beasts until I fight them myself. And if it is my fate, then I will find death." And although he was counseled against this, Fiachna began to arm himself. It was at this moment that Fiachna saw a single tall warrior striding toward them. He wore a cloak of one color, closed with a brooch of white silver, and a shirt of satin next to his white skin, a gold circlet on his head, and sandals of gold on his 2 feet. "What reward would you give me to put an end to those sheep?" asked the warrior. "By my word," said Fiachna, "whatever is in my power to give." "I ask the gift that is in your power," said the warrior. "Shall I tell you?" "Say on," said Fiachna. "Give me the gold ring you wear as a token to show your wife when I go to Ireland to lie with her." "Then it must be so," said Fiachna, "for the sake of my men, for I cannot allow more of them to fall." "It will not be as bad as you imagine," said the warrior. "I will sire a glorious child upon your wife, even Mongan the fair, son of Fiachna. And I will go to your wife in your own shape and wearing the ring, so that your wife will not be dishonored. I am Manannán mac Lir, and by this agreement you, Fiachna, will gain the kingship of Lochlin and also over the Saxons and Britons." Then Manannán produced a venomous hound from under his cloak and handed it to Fiachna on a chain. "Not a single sheep will be wearing its head by the end of today. She will kill them all, and 300 of the Lochlin men with them, and you will have the victory." And that's how Fiachna gained the victory. As to the Cailleach Dubh, well, Fiachna, much enriched, gave her 7 castles with lands and cattle parks and 100 of every kind of cattle, and she seemed satisfied. And Fiachna himself returned home to find his wife big-bellied and pregnant. When she bore a son, they named him Mongan. I may have mentioned this story in season 3, I can't remember, when we talked a great deal about Mongan and Manannán. It seems that another Ulster king, called Bran, son of Feval, also met Manannán around this time. Bran was in a ship when he encountered Manannán driving his chariot across the sea. They had a long conversation, which you can hear all about in season 3, episode 5. Toward the end of that conversation, Manannán tells Bran about his plan to father a son on Fiachna's wife. That's what I mean when I say that Celtic mythology is a network, like the way these 2 stories join up. So these are the words that Manannán says to Bran, son of Feval, about fathering a child. "This shape, he on whom thou lookest," in other words, the shape that Manannán has taken when he meets Bran, "this shape will come to thy parts," in other words, to Ulster. "'Tis mine to journey to her house, to the woman of Linyamoy. For it is Manannán, the son of Ler, from the chariot in the shape of a man. Of his progeny will be a very short while, a fair man in a body of white clay." So in other words, he'll be something like a mortal, so he won't live forever. "Manannán, the descendant of Ler, will be a vigorous bedfellow to Cantigern," that's Fiachna's wife. "He shall be called to his son in the beautiful world. Fiachna will acknowledge him as his son. He will be in the shape of every beast, both on the azure sea and on land. He will be a dragon before hosts at the onset." Now that might mean he will be a great warrior, a dragon. "He will be a wolf of every great forest. He will be a stag with horns of silver in the land where chariots are driven. He will be a speckled salmon in a full pool. He will be a seal. He will be a fair white swan. So I don't think all of these things describe him as a warrior. Mongan himself confirms his animal existences many years later in a conversation with Saint Columba. Saint Columba asks him about Loch Foyle, which now covers the drowned kingdom of Bran, son of Fival. And Mongan replies like this: "It was yellow, it was flowery, it was green, it was hilly." That is the land which is now covered by the water. It was rich in liquor and strewn rushes and silver and chariots. I have grazed it when I was a stag. I have swum it when I was a salmon, when I was a seal. I have run upon it when I was a wolf. I have gone round it when I was a human. Since we had got so close to Mongan, I thought we might as well hear about his animal lives. Now, here's today's question. In stories where Manannán is accomplishing things, as he often does, he's quite a meddler, quite a doer, I often wonder whether his influence on the events in whatever story this is has begun long before he appears in the story, like he's off stage pulling strings. So thinking of the story of Fiachna and Lochlin and all of that, at what point in the story do you think Manannán might have begun to orchestrate things? There are no wrong answers here. Just give it some thought. But what about these killer sheep? It's hard to imagine anything as harmless looking than these little soft clouds, isn't it? I'm not scared. Are you scared? On the other hand, the Irish sometimes spoke of the Isle of Man as if it was the other world. So maybe we should be thinking of something more along the lines of these now rare sheep, native to Manannán's Isle. Fiachna isn't the only Irish hero to have trouble with violent and aggressive sheep. In the story of Taig, son of Cian, Taig visits a number of otherworld islands. This is the first island he comes to. They rode for 20 days and 20 nights. Finally, they saw fair land with a gentle coastline where they beached the currach, that's their boat. They lit fires and began to prepare food, which they enjoyed with good appetite. They made their beds on the beautiful green grass. They've been quite seasick up to now, and immediately fell into slumber, not awakening until sunrise the following morning. Taig prepared to explore the land in order to see what kind of people or animals were living there. He put on his battle armor and took 30 armed men with him. They looked at every part of the island, but they found no signs of people at all, only flocks of sheep. These sheep were of enormous size, as big as a large horse, and their wool was scattered everywhere. In one flock, they saw a gigantic ram, bigger than all the others, with 9 horns on him. He charged at the men, butting at them violently. Angered, they began to do battle with the ram, who broke 5 of their shields, killing one of their number. Taig slew the beast with a single spear throw. It took the remaining 29 men to carry the monster back to the shore. There they dressed the meat and roasted it, and found it tender and delicious. The wool was also of the finest quality, so they saved a great store of it in the currach. They stayed on the island for 3 more nights, feasting on the enormous sheep. As they explored further, they found human bones of great size, but no sign of what had become of these giants. I find this kind of amusing, since Taig is supposed to be on a desperate mission to rescue his wife, but he's not going to waste all that wool. Good man, maybe his wife liked to knit. A little later in his travels, Taig meets Clina, who was in our story yesterday. Another little connection. But before we leave the sheep forever, I've got a few more for us to look at. In the romance of Peredur, in the Mabinogion, the hero is wandering around having adventures when he comes upon an unusual scene. He continued to a river valley, and the edges of the valley were wooded, and on each side of the river were flat meadows. On one side of the river, he could see a flock of white sheep. On the other side, he could see a flock of black sheep. When one of the white sheep bleated, one of the black sheep would come across and turn white. And when one of the black sheep bleated, one of the white sheep would come across and turn black. This scene is depicted in a wonderful modern tapestry by Martin Weatherhead. And something similar happens in the Irish story called The Voyage of Mile Doon. They're also traveling from strange island to strange island. On the morning of the third day, they came to another island, which was divided in two parts by a wall of brass running across the middle. They saw two flocks of great sheep, one on each side of the wall, and those on one side were black, while those on the other side were white. A very large man was employed in dividing and arranging the sheep, and he often took a sheep and threw it with much ease over the wall from one side to the other. When he threw over a white sheep among the black ones, it became black immediately. And in like manner, when he threw a black sheep over, it was instantly changed to white. The travelers were very much alarmed on witnessing these doings. So this is another kind of connection between two stories, when something so strange happens in stories from two different countries. Peredur, of course, is a Welsh story, and The Voyage of Mile Doon is from Ireland. So I'll leave you to think about sheep, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye for now.